Chapter 5, Drawing on Your Childhood Artistry. This amazing drawing was made by Paul Cannon, now an adult, when he was 5 years old. His father, British artist, educator Colin Cannon, wrote on the back of the drawing, Paul, age 5. He used to cover large sheets of paper with figures, knights, warriors, horses, etc., against appropriate backgrounds. He did this before he had seen the Beau Tapestry. The Beau Tapestry is an 11th century linen embroidery recording the events of the battles of Norman conquest of England. Self-explanatory. All right. Age 9 or 10 seems to mark the abrupt end of children's artistic development in terms of drawing skills. At this age, children confront an artistic crisis, a conflict between their increasingly complex perceptions of the world around them and their current level of drawing skills to depict what they see. The development of children's art is linked to developmental challenges in the brain. In the early stages, infants' brains' hemispheres are not clearly specialized for separate functions. Lateralization, the consolidation of specific functions into one hemisphere or the other, progresses gradually through the childhood years, paralleling the acquisition of language skills and the symbols of childhood art. Lateralization is usually complete by around age 10, and this coincides with the period of conflict in children's art, when the symbol system seems to override perceptions and to interfere with accurate drawing of those perceptions. One could speculate that conflict arises because children may be using the wrong brain mode, the L mode, to accomplish a task best suited for the R mode. Perhaps they simply cannot work out a way to shift to the visual mode. By age 10, language dominates, adding further complication as names and symbols overpower visual spatial perceptions. Figure 5-1 and 5-2 illustrate the persistence of childlike forms and drawings by a brilliant young professional man who was just completing a doctoral degree at a major university. He joined one of my classes because he said he had always wondered if he could learn to draw. I watched the young man as he did 2 pre-instruction drawings, one of himself and one of another student. He first drew himself as seen in a mirror, and then he drew a student who posed for him. He would draw a bit, erase, and draw again, persisting for about 20 minutes. During this time, he became restless and seemed. If we were to attach a label to this learning disability the way educators have attached the label dyslexia to reading problems, we might call the problem dyspictoria or dysartistica or some such term, and we would seek a remedy. But no one has done so because drawing is not considered a vital skill for survival in our culture, whereas speech and reading are. Therefore, hardly anyone seems to notice that most children give up drawing at age 9 or 10. These children grow up to become the adults who say that they never could draw and can't even draw a straight line. The same adults, however, if questioned, often say that they would have liked to learn to draw, just for their own satisfaction at solving the drawing problem that plagued them as children. But they felt they had to stop drawing because they simply couldn't figure out how to do it. A consequence of this early cutting off of artistic development is that fully competent and self-confident adults often become suddenly self-conscious, embarrassed, and anxious if asked to draw a picture of anything, but especially a human face or figure. In this situation, individuals often say such things as, "No, I can't. Whatever I draw is always terrible. It looks like a kid's drawing." Or, "I don't like to draw. It makes me feel so stupid." You yourself may have felt a twinge or two of these feelings when you did the pre-instruction drawings. The crisis period. At 9 or 10, children develop a passion for realistic drawing, especially the depiction of space, how things go back in space and look three-dimensional. They become sharply critical of their early childhood drawings and begin to draw certain favorite subjects over and over again, attempting to perfect the image. They may regard as failure anything short of perfect realism. Perhaps you can remember your own attempts at the age to make things look right in your drawings and your feeling of disappointment with the results. Drawings that might have made you proud at an early age perhaps seemed hopelessly wrong and childish and embarrassing. Regarding your drawings, you may have said, as many children this age say, "This is terrible. I'm awful at drawing and I'm not doing it anymore." There's another unfortunately frequent reason that children stop drawing. Unthinking individuals sometimes make the sarcastic or derogatory remarks about children's art. The thoughtless person may be a teacher, a parent, another child, or perhaps an admired older brother or sister. Many adults have related to me their painfully clear memories of someone ridiculing their attempts at drawing. Sadly, children often blame themselves and the drawing for causing the hurt, rather than blaming the careless critic. Therefore, to protect the ego from further damage, children react defensively, and understandably so. They seldom ever attempt to draw again. I'm gonna get a drink. And I know that was loud. Okay. Art in school. Every sympathetic middle school art teachers, a rapidly disappearing group, I regret to say, who may feel dismayed by unfair criticism of children's art and who want to help, become discouraged by the style of drawing that young adolescents prefer. Complex, detailed scenes, labored attempts at realistic drawing, endless repetitions of favorite themes such as racing cars for boys or rearing horses for girls. Teachers recall the beguiling freedom and charm of younger children's work and wonder what happened. They deplore what they see as tightness and lack of creativity in students' drawings, and the children themselves often become their own most unrelenting critics. Consequently, teachers frequently resort to crafts projects because they seem safer and cause less anguish. Projects such as paper mosaics, string painting, drip painting, and other manipulations of materials. As a result, most students do not learn how to draw in the early and middle grades. Their self-criticism becomes permanent, and they very rarely try to learn how to draw later in life. Like the doctoral candidate mentioned above, they might grow up to be highly skilled in a number of areas, but if asked to draw a person, they will produce the same childlike image they were drawing at age 10. From infancy to adolescence, for most of my students, it has proven beneficial to go back in time to try to understand how their visual imagery and childhood symbols develop from infancy to adolescence. With this understanding, students seem better able to unstick their artistic development and move on to adult skills. The scribbling stage. Making marks on paper begins at about age 1.5. When you as an infant were given a pencil or crayon and you by yourself made a mark, it's hard for us to imagine the sense of wonder a child experiences on seeing a black line emerge from the end of a stick. A line the child controls. You and I, all of us, had that experience. After a tentative start, you probably scribbled with delight on every available surface, perhaps including your parents' best books and walls of a bedroom or two. Your scribbles were seemingly quite random at first, but very quickly began to take on definite shapes. One of the basic scribbling movements is a circular one, probably arising simply from the way the shoulder and arm, wrist, hand, and fingers work together. A circular movement is a natural movement, more so, for instance, than the movements required to draw a square. Try both on a piece of paper and you'll see what I mean. The stage of symbols. After some days or weeks of scribbling, infants and apparently all human children make the basic discovery of art, the discovery first made by prehistoric humans. A drawn image can stand for something out there in the world. The child makes a circular mark, looks at it, adds 2 marks for eyes, points to the drawing and says, "Mommy," or "Daddy," or "That's me," or "My dog," or whatever. Thus, we all make the uniquely human leap of insight that is the foundation for all art. From the prehistoric cave paintings up through the centuries to the art of Da Vinci, Rembrandt, and Picasso. With great delight, infants proceed to draw circles with eyes, mouth, and lines sticking out to represent arms and legs, as in Figure 5.3. This form, asymmetrical, circular form, is a basic form universally drawn by infants. The circular form can be used for almost anything. With slight variations, the basic pattern can stand for a human being, a cat, a sun, a jellyfish, an elephant, a crocodile, a flower, or a germ. For you as a child, the picture was whatever you said it was, although you probably made subtle and charming adjustments of the basic form to get the idea across. I believe that one of the main functions of the symbolic drawing of childhood is to enhance language acquisition. By the time children are about 3.5, the imagery of their art becomes more complex, reflecting growing awareness and perceptions of the world. A body is attached to the head, though it may be smaller than the head. Arms may still grow out of the head, but more often they emerge from the body, sometimes from below the waist. Legs are attached to the body. By age 4, children are keenly aware of details of clothing, buttons, and zippers, for example, appear as details of the drawings. Fingers appear at the ends of arms and hands, and toes at the ends of legs and feet. Numbers of fingers and toes vary imaginatively. I have counted as many as 31 fingers on one hand and as few as 1 toe per foot. Although children's drawings of figures are smaller in many ways, through trial and error, each child works out favorite images, which become refined through repetition. Children draw their special images over and over, memorizing them and adding details as time goes on. Eventually, the sets of symbols become embodied in memory and are remarkably stable over time. Pictures that tell stories. Around age 4 or 5, children begin to use drawings to tell stories and to work out problems, using small or large adjustments of the basic forms to express their intended meaning. For example, in Figure 5-7, the young artist has made the arm that holds the umbrella huge in relation to the other arm, because the arm that holds the umbrella is the important point of the drawing. Another instance of using drawing to portray feeling is a family portrait drawn by a shy 5-year-old whose every waking moment apparently was dominated by his older sister. And that is... Oh, okay. Yeah, she's kind of monstrous and huge and overbearing. Even a Picasso could hardly have expressed a feeling with greater power than that. Once the feeling was drawn, giving form to formless emotions, the child who drew the family portrait may have been better able to cope with his overwhelming sister. The landscape. By around age 5 or 6, children have developed a set of symbols to create a landscape. Again, by a process of trial and error. Children usually settle on a single version of a symbolic landscape, which is endlessly repeated. Perhaps you can remember the landscape you drew around age 5 or 6. What were the components of that landscape? First, the ground and sky. Thinking symbolically, a child knows that the ground is at the bottom and the sky is at the top. Therefore, the ground is the bottom edge of the paper and the sky is the top edge. Children emphasize this point if they are working with color by painting a green or brown stripe across the bottom, blue across the top. Most children's landscapes contain some version of a house. Try to call up in your mind's eye an image of the house you drew. Did it have windows with curtains? And what else? A door? What was on the door? A doorknob, of course, because that's how you get in. I have never seen an authentic child-drawn house with a missing doorknob. You may begin to remember the rest of your landscape. The sun. Did you use the corner sun or a circle with radiating rays? The clouds, the chimney, the flowers, the trees. Did yours have a convenient limb sticking out for a swing? The mountains. Were yours like upside down ice cream cones? And what else? A road going back, a fence, birds. Redraw your childhood landscape. At this point, before you read any further, please take a sheet of paper and draw the landscape that you drew as a child. Label your drawing, recalled childhood landscape. You may remember this image with surprising clarity as a whole image, complete in all its parts, or it may come back to you more gradually as you begin to draw. While you are drawing the landscape, try also to recall the pleasure drawing gave you as a child, the satisfaction with which each symbol was drawn, and the sense of rightness about the placement of each symbol within the drawing. Recall the sense that nothing must be left out. When all the symbols were in place, your sense that the drawing was complete. If you can't recall the drawing at this point, don't be concerned. You may recall it later. If not, it may simply indicate that you've blocked it out for some reason, possibly a criticizing or ridiculing remark by some unthinking person. Usually about 10% of my adult students are unable to recall their childhood drawings. Before we go on, let's take a minute to look at some recalled childhood landscape drawn by adults. Figure 510 and figure 511. First, you will observe the landscapes. While similar, are personal images, each different from the other. Observe also that in every case, the composition, the way the elements of each drawing are composed or distributed within the four edges, seems exactly right, in the sense that not a single element could be added or removed without disturbing the rightness of the whole. After you have looked at the examples, observe your own drawing. Think back on how you did the drawing. Did you do it with a sense of sureness, knowing where each part was to go? For each part, did you find that you had an exact symbol that was perfect in itself and fit perfectly with the other symbols? You may have been aware of feeling the same sense of satisfaction that you felt as a child when the forms were in place and the image completed. The stage of complexity. Now, like the ghost in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, we move you on to observe yourself at a slightly later age. At 9 or 10, possibly you may remember some of the drawings you did at that age, in the 5th, 6th, or 7th grade. During this period, children try for more detail in their artwork, hoping by this means to achieve greater realism, which is a prized goal. Concern for composition diminishes, the forms often being placed almost at random on the page. Children's concern for where things are located in the drawing is replaced with concerns for how things look, particularly the details of forms. Overall, drawings by older children show greater complexity and, at the same time, less assurance than do the landscapes of early childhood. Also, around this time, children's drawings become differently differentiated by gender, probably due to cultural factors. Boys began to draw automobiles, hot rods and racing cars, and war scenes with dive bombers, submarines, tanks, and rockets. They draw legendary figures and heroes, bearded pirates, Viking crewmen and their ships, television stars, mountain climbers, and deep sea divers. They are fascinated by block letters, especially monograms, and some odd images such as my favorite, an eyeball complete with piercing dagger and pools of blood. Okay. Hey, kids are kids. Meanwhile, girls are drawing tamer things, flowers and vases, waterfalls, mountains reflected in still lakes, pretty girls standing or sitting on the grass, and fashion models with incredible eyelashes, elaborate hairstyles, tiny waists and feet, and hands held behind the back because hands are too hard to draw. Figures 514 through 517 are some examples of these early adolescent drawings. I've included a cartoon drawing. Both boys and girls draw cartoons. I believe that cartooning appeals to children at this age because cartoons employ familiar symbolic forms but are used in a more sophisticated way, thus enabling adolescents to avoid the dreaded criticism that their drawings are babyish. The stage of realism. By around age 10 or 11, children's passion for realism is in full bloom. When their drawings don't come out right, meaning that things don't look real, children often become discouraged and ask their teachers for help. The teacher may say, "You must look more carefully," but this doesn't help because the child doesn't know what to look more carefully for. Let me illustrate that with an example. Say that a 10-year-old wants to draw a picture of a cube, perhaps a three-dimensional block of wood. Wanting the drawing to look real, the child tries to draw the cube from an angle, not just straight on, side view. That would show only a single plane, and thus would not reveal the true shape of the cube. To do this, the child must draw the oddly angled shapes just as they appear, that is, just like the image that falls on the retina. Those shapes are not square. In fact, the child must suppress knowing that the cube is square and draw shapes that are funny. The drawn cube will look like a cube only if it is comprised of oddly angled shapes. Put another way, the child must draw unsquare shapes to draw a square cube. And the child must accept this paradox, this illogical process that conflicts with verbal conceptual knowledge. Perhaps this is one meaning of Picasso's famous 1923 statement that art is a lie that makes us realize the truth. If verbal knowledge of the cube's real shape overwhelms the student purely visual perception and quote-unquote incorrect drawing results, drawing with the kinds of problems that make adolescents despair. Knowing that cubes have square corners, students usually start a drawing of a cube with a square corner. Knowing that a cube rests on a flat surface, students draw straight lines across the bottom. Their arrows compound themselves as the drawing proceeds, and the students become more and more confused. Though a sophisticated viewer, familiar with the art of cubism and abstraction, might find the incorrect drawing more interesting than the correct drawing, And young students find praise of their wrong forms incomprehensible. In this case, the child's intent was to make the cube look real. Therefore, to the child, the drawing is a failure. To say otherwise seems to students as absurd as telling them that 2 plus 2 equals 5. Is a creative and praiseworthy solution to a math problem. On the basis of incorrect drawings such as the cube drawing, students may decide that they can't draw. But they can draw. The forms indicate that manually they are perfectly able to draw the lines. The dilemma is that previously stored knowledge, useful in other contexts, prevents their seeing the thing as it is, right there in front of their eyes. The teacher could solve the problem by showing the students how, that is, by demonstrating the process of drawing the cube. Learning by demonstration is a time-honored method of teaching art, and it works if the teacher knows how to draw and has confidence enough to demonstrate realistic drawing in front of a class. Unfortunately, since many teachers at the crucial elementary and middle school levels are themselves not able to draw, they often have the same feelings of inadequacy as the children they wish to teach. Also, many teachers wish children at this age would be freer, less concerned about realism in their artwork. But however much some teachers may deplore their students' insistence on realism, the children themselves are relentless. They will have realism, or they will give up art forever. They want their drawings to match what they see, and they want to know how to do that. I believe that children at this age love realism because they are trying to learn how to see. They are willing to put great energy and effort into the task if the results are encouraging. A few children are lucky enough to accidentally rediscover the secret, how to see things in a different R mode way. I think I was one of those children who, by chance or perhaps by having a somewhat quirky brain, stumbles on the process. But the majority of children need to be taught how to make that cognitive shift. How the symbol system, development in childhood, influences seeing. Now we are coming closer to the problem and its solution. First, what prevents a person from seeing things clearly enough to draw them? The left hemisphere has no patience with detailed, complicated, and paradoxical perception and says, in effect, it's a cube. I tell you, that's enough to know. You don't need to look at it because we know it is square. Here, I have a symbol for that. Add a few details if you want, but don't bother me with this looking real business. And where do the symbols come from? From the years of childhood drawing during which every person develops a set of symbols that becomes embedded in memory. The symbols are ready to be called out, just as you recalled them to draw your childhood landscape. The symbols are also ready to be called out when you draw a face. The efficient left brain says, oh yes, eyes. Here's a symbol for eyes, the one we've always used. A nose? Yes. Here's the way we do it. Mouth, hair, eyelashes? There's a symbol for each. There are also symbols for birds, grass, rain, hands, trees, and on and on. What is the solution to this dilemma? The most efficient solution is our main strategy. Present the brain with a task the left brain either can't or won't handle. You have already experienced this strategy slightly with the vase/faces drawing, and more strikingly with the upside down drawing. And you have already begun to recognize and experience the alternate state of right hemisphere mode. You're beginning to know that while you are in that slightly different subjective state of mind, you slow down so that you can see more clearly. There is an unawareness of time and the sense of time passing. You do not attend to people talking. You may hear the sound of speech, but you do not decode the sounds into meaningful words. If someone speaks directly to you, it seems as though it would take a great effort to cross back. Think again in words and answer. Furthermore, whatever you are doing seems immensely interesting. You are attentive and concentrated and feel at one with the thing you are concentrating on. You feel energized but calm, alert without anxiety. You feel self-confident and capable of doing the task at hand. Your thinking is not in words, and your mind is locked on to the object you are drawing. On leaving the R mode state, you feel not tired but refreshed. Our job now is to bring this state into clearer focus and under greater conscious control in order to take advantage of the right hemisphere's superior ability to see and draw. And here is a Albrecht Dürer watercolor on paper, Vienna, Austria. From childhood onward, we have learned to see things in terms of words. We name things. We know facts about them. The dominant left verbal system doesn't want too much information about things it perceives, just enough to recognize and to categorize. In ordinary life, we screen out a large proportion of incoming perceptions, a necessary process to enable us to focus our thinking, and the one that works very well for us most of the time. But drawing requires that you look at something for a long time, perceiving lots of details and how they fit together to form wholes, registering as much information as possible, ideally everything, as did Albrecht Dürer in his drawing of a hare or a rabbit. And that is the end of chapter 5. Working on my voice. We'll get there. Note to self, avoid cereal, milk, get some nasal spray. Anyways, love you guys. See you next time.